Thursday Coast today, but today in the person um, of not Marcos, but another Mark. I'm a Mark. Marcos is a Mark, but he's Marcos as in Mark operating system. So we've got another Mark with us today. Devil's Tower on Twitter. Mark Sumner. Hey man, good morning. How are you?
Good morning, Mark. How are you?
I'm cool, man. What city are you in?
I'm just south of St. Louis.
Okay, so we're not. I was afraid you were on the West Coast with Marcos. We didn't have you up too early.
No, I think that's part of why Marcos pointed at me. He knew I'd be up.
Wonderful. How's everything going, man?
Everything's going good.
Good, good,
Been
good.
it's been an interesting week.
Oh my God, has it, hasn't it? So you've been writing pretty extensively about a lot of this stuff, particularly Papadopoulos. Um, uh, this is, in fact, you posted something this morning. Papadopoulos' statement raises an intriguing question: Who chose um, WikiLeaks? Talk to us about that, if you would, Mark.
Yeah, I'm just kind of going through, a series of what happened here. But on April 26th, Papadopoulos talks to the character that's referred to in the document as the professor, which we now know is this Joseph Millsud from the London Academy of Diplomacy. So Miss Sud tells him that the Russians have got dirt on Hillary, that dirt's in the form of thousands of emails. And they say they've got emails from Clinton. So it's not clear in the document whether they tell him that that's the stolen emails from the DNC and from John Podesta, but let's assume that they do. The very next day, Papadopoulos is talking to Paul Manafort. That's the high-ranking campaign official in the statements of defense. So that means that Manafort has over a month lead time before Rob Goldstein calls um, uh, Trump Jr. on June 3rd with an email to say, hey, let's have a meeting about this dirt that the Russians have on Clinton.
Mm-hmm,
He
mm-hmm.
already knows what the material is. So by the time they get around to that Trump Tower meeting on June the 9th, everybody on Trump's senior management team that's sitting in that room, Don Jr., Manafort, Jared Kushner, they already know what's on offer from the Russians. So when Natalia Veselnitskaya says, hey, what we talked about in that room was mostly the Magnitsky Act, maybe she's telling the truth because they already know what's on offer. So what they're talking about is what we want in payment.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But there's one other thing that has to be worked out. What the Russians have got is a lot of information. Even for the Trump campaign, it would be pretty obvious if they suddenly started producing directly the stolen emails from the DNC. So they've got to have a way to distribute this information so that Trump can use it, but something that gives the illusion of a distance from the campaign so it can be used without them directly providing the material. So it comes out through WikiLeaks. So the question is, WikiLeaks doesn't start distributing this for a month after that meeting. Did they discuss at that meeting how this material was going to get distributed? And if they did, was it Russia that said it's coming out through WikiLeaks, or was it somebody on Trump's campaign that pointed at Julian Assange and said, hey, this would be a good way to get that material out there?
Wow, that's a pretty. I mean, that's a pretty scary question, and that in and of itself is that criminal just on reaching out or deciding on WikiLeaks itself? Would that be a crime, so to speak?
I don't know that would be a crime, but it would certainly compound the idea that the Trump campaign was aware that they were getting stolen material from the Russians and that they were making use of that stolen material, and that rather than turning that material over to the government or making the government aware that the Russians had that material, because this is at a point where no one's come to them, at least, and said, hey, the FBI is aware that the Russians have this material. This is before they've been briefed about it. So they've got a head start on everybody in knowing that the Russians have this material.
Mark Sumner with us, folks, Thursday Coast. Quick questions, too. 866-99-SIRIUS, 866-997-4748 is the number to call. You also wrote a piece yesterday where you say that Donald Trump knew Papadopoulos was trying to arrange a meeting with Russia. Talk to us about that, if you would.
Right. Well, one of the things that's been going on this week has been a lot of desperate effort to sort of not just put some distance between Trump and Papadopoulos, but to demean and diminish Papadopoulos. He's been called everything from a volunteer. They've treated him like a guy that walked into one of their headquarters, for a slice of free campaign pizza, and they've called him a coffee boy. But it's become pretty obvious that Papadopoulos was out there meeting with the press in London, meeting with the press in Israel. He was out there talking to foreign leaders for the campaign. He had a serious role within the campaign, and he had meetings with not just Trump, but with Sessions. And he, at that meeting with Trump, brought to Trump the idea of going to Russia. So Trump was aware that this was happening, and at that meeting with Trump, it seems that Jeff Sessions shut him up at the moment. But what nobody told him was, hey, stop doing that. He was back the very next day sending emails and phone calls to the campaign saying, I'm still trying to arrange this Russian meeting, and nobody told him to stop. In fact, what he got was encouragement.
He got encouragement from Trump himself?
We got encouragement from Sam Clovis, who was the co-chair of the campaign. Clovis sent him a note saying, great work, after he first told him that he was trying to line up this meeting with Russia. And then later he got a email, apparently from Clovis as well, encouraging him to make the trip himself. In the middle, what he got was some communication from Paul Manafort, where Manafort, who was the high-ranking campaign official in the statement, what Manafort told him to do was, that make it clear that Donald Trump's not going to make this trip to Moscow himself, that it needs to be someone low level. Right, so to not bring a lot of attention to it.
So what happened? Did he end up making that trip?
No, it doesn't seem that Papadopoulos himself made a trip to Moscow. Of course, over this period of the campaign timeline, Carter Page did end up in Moscow. So whether that trip had anything to do with the trip that Papadopoulos was trying to arrange isn't really clear. In the statement where Sam Clovis tells Papadopoulos to go, he says, and take another unnamed campaign advisor. So was that Carter Page? That's not clear.
866-99-SIRIUS, 866-997-4748. And Papadopoulos was in touch with Manafort as well, correct?
Oh yeah, Papadopoulos. The number of people that he's communicating to. He's talking to Clovis on a regular basis. He's also talking to the person that's identified in the document as high-ranking official, which a number of sources have fingered as Manafort. And then he talks several times to either another campaign supervisor, which would be someone else at Clovis's level, and considering that Clovis was co-chair of the campaign, was that Corey Lewandowski at that point, or was it Jared? Was it Trump Jr.? He also talks to people that are identified as other high-ranking officials in the campaign. So it seems like he had a broad reach, and what he talked to all of them about was Russia. We don't know, the extent of how much communication Papadopoulos really had, because what we're getting in this statement, is a very small slice of the back and forth. We're only getting enough to confirm the charges against Papadopoulos. We don't see the communication coming back to him from the campaign for the most part, and we don't see most of what he told them. We just see enough to confirm that he lied to the FBI.
You have another headline from yesterday. The truth about George Papadopoulos shows that Donald Trump is a liar who hired
Hired.
liars to lie.
Right. That's Trump's charge against Papadopoulos is that he lied. Well, because he lied to defend Trump.
Hmm.
And it's ironic that now Trump turns around to use that the charge against him when the thing that Papadopoulos did, the thing that he's being charged with, is not lying to defend himself, but lying to defend Trump. He didn't deny that he had these meetings with the professor. He didn't deny that they talked about going to Russia, or even talked about the emails. He denied the times that they happened, to kind of try to move them out of the time when he was working for the Trump campaign.
Yeah, yeah. 866-99-SIRIUS, 866-997-4748. But he's turned now, right? I mean,
Oh,
Papadopoulos is working with.
absolutely, and it's clear that Papadopoulos, from the way they phrased it within the statement, it's clear that Papadopoulos has been cooperating with us for a period of months, and so that should also be one of those things that strikes a little fear within the other people within the campaign, because this was a guy that clearly was communicating to a lot of different high-level people within the Trump campaign. And if that communication continued, and it seems to have done so, because Papadopoulos was apparently still there at the time of the inauguration in terms of communicating with people in the campaign. So what happened over that time period? Who did he talk to, and how many times was that being recorded? How useful was Papadopoulos in kind of confirming and filling in the gaps in the story that Mueller is trying to uncover?
866-99-SIRIUS, 866-997-4748. Of course, you've also looked deeply into Manafort over time. Mark Sumner with us, Thursday Coast, at Devil's Tower on Twitter. What about Manafort? This is a pretty shady character.
It is amazing. The thing that really strikes me in Manafort's indictment, one, you have to wonder, how did this guy get away with it for so long? Mm-hmm. He's blatant in the things that he did. He wasn't particularly clever, and he wasn't setting up particularly complex financial arrangements. He was just making these limited companies in Cyprus for the most part, and then wiring himself money directly. He wired himself money to buy 4 Range Rovers and Mercedes and $1 million worth of rugs. It's pretty blatant. And then the other thing that strikes me in looking at Manafort's documents is just that the guy was a crook at every level.
Yeah.
We're talking about a guy that was dealing with $75 million worth of money that's going through these offshore accounts. He's laundering $18 million worth of money into the U.S., and then he takes the time to do things like he bought a condo, and instead of setting on that condo or moving into that condo, he spent almost $3 million on it, and then he rents it out on Airbnb to make a little more money. And then that's not the worst part of it. Not only is he renting out this condo on Airbnb, he wants to get a loan against this condo. And when he goes to the bank, he discovers that he can get a lower loan rate if someone's living in the condo than if it's rental property. So he tells his own daughter to pretend to be living in the property so that he can get a quarter-point cut on the interest rate on the loan that he's taking against the condo that he bought with money that came from ex-Soviet oligarchs that he illegally brought into the U.S. So he's a crook in the big stuff, and he's a crook on the tiny level, too. He just can't help himself.
866-99-SIRIUS. Did Trump know who Manafort was?
It seems like everyone should have known. Again, the guy was pretty obvious. He's a long time, old hand player in Republican politics. He worked for Gerald Ford. He's been around that long. He worked for Ronald Reagan. He, by the way, was in charge of Reagan's Southern strategy. So when you think about Reagan starting his campaign in the same town where uh, civil rights activists were killed, and when you think
Right.
about
Right.
all of those dog whistles that went off during the Reagan campaign, you can think about Paul Manafort being involved in that. He also worked for George H.W. Bush. By the time he got to manage the convention for Trump, this was the third time that Paul Manafort had managed a Republican convention. But that's not all he's doing. His overseas lobbying includes, Ferdinand Marcos.
Right. Right.
It includes such a list of different dictators and that he becomes known
Jonas Savimbi, and
Yep.
as evidence, he was paid by the South African government. So this has always been a pretty shady character.
Right. His lobbying firm had the nickname the Torturer's Lobby. That
Wow.
tells you, who this guy was.
That's a lot. Thursday Coast, Devil's Tower, at Devil's Tower, Mark Sumner on Thursday Coast. I know you're going to keep following this, Mark. So we'll be back in touch, man. Appreciate your in-depth work too. Okay, man. We've learned a lot.
Thanks for having me on.
All right, pleasure to have you. Thank you, buddy. Take care now.
Okay.
Stephanie Miller, Tom Hartman, Michelangelo Signorelli, Dean Obadella, all coming your way on Sirius XM Progress, Resistance Radio. If all minds are clear, it has been made plain.